It's time for VAX Talk. Let's talk VPDs. We're shaping the conversation about vaccines. To learn more, visit vaxtalk.org.
Hello and welcome to VAX Talk. This is a podcast for people who are happily contributing to herd immunity.
Good job, everybody.
Woohoo! My name is Karen Ernst, and I am the Executive Director of Voices for Vaccines.
And I'm Nathan Boonstra. I'm a general pediatrician here at Blank Children's Hospital in Des Moines, Iowa.
So here's the thing about this episode. This episode is going to feature Ethan Posard, who is a young person. He's 17 years old. He's amazing. We're going to talk about kids. We're going to talk to kids. So while our podcast has an explicit rating because sometimes we talk about adult topics, even though this says E next to it, this one is perfectly acceptable for kids to listen to.
In fact, we recommend it. It would be a great one to listen to with your kids who might be getting shots in the near future, because he talks about what that's like and talks about why it's important.
And it is important.
Yes.
So please share this with your young people. If you are, in particular, a health or biology teacher, this would be a fun episode for them to listen to, especially the last 20 minutes. So please do that. But in the meantime, before we talk to Ethan, I just want to talk a little bit about adolescent vaccines. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart because my children are sort of in that lane right now. We are doing the adolescent vaccines. I will happily tell everyone that I have one 10-year-old and one 15-year-old and a 24-year-old who's, he can get his own vaccines now. But the 15-year-old has had his meningococcal vaccine, he's had his HPV vaccine, and he has had his Tdap. He had them at age 12 because that's when our clinic does those vaccines. And he wasn't super duper happy about them, but he also had a classmate who had suffered through non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and so he knew how dangerous cancer was. And when I told him, you're going to get a vaccine that can help prevent certain types of cancer, he was okay with that. So that's kind of the topic of this podcast today, is talking to kids about vaccines and letting kids talk about vaccines. So I have a question for you, Nathan.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to call you Dr. Boonstra. Put on your Dr. Boonstra stethoscope and whatnot.
Okay. Well, this is a Wii remote, and I'm going to hang it around my neck, and that's going to have to do. Go ahead.
All right. You're Dr. Boonstra, Wii remote. So when adolescents come into the exam room with their parents and you're talking about vaccines, what do you say to those kids before they get their shots? Yeah,
so I think the first thing to bring up is that I talk to the adolescents themselves, and actually it's kind of my MO to talk to all kids about their shots, particularly from age 3 and 4 up. So that's true about the kids that are getting their pre-kindergarten shots. I make an effort to not be talking to the parents about the shots and then have the kid, be talked about while they're right there in the middle of us. I want to talk to the kid, and in this case, talk to the adolescent about their shots, and then have the parent be in the middle so that they can join in the conversation. And then everybody's, I think, the best included. So when I talk with an adolescent about the shots that they're going to get, I frame it kind of similarly to what you mentioned. I talk about the 3 shots that they're generally going to get, which is going to be their Tdap, it's going to be their HPV vaccine, and it's going to be their meningococcal vaccine. And I talk briefly, but in at least somewhat descriptive fashion, as to what each of those do. And so that I try to frame it in terms of something that they're going to understand. So I say, okay, your first shot is this Tdap. It protects you against tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. Now, tetanus you might have heard of. You step on a dirty nail. It can cause lockjaw. You've probably heard of this. It can be really awful. It can be fatal. So that's the first component of the first vaccine. It also protects against this stuff called diphtheria. That's this old school thing. You've probably never heard of it. We don't want it to come roaring back like it's the 19th century. So we keep immunizing against that. And then whooping cough or pertussis, that's called the 100 days cough. You're a busy guy. You're in XYZ activities. You don't need 100 days worth of cough that's going to knock you out of that. And you certainly don't need to pass that on to a young baby who could get seriously ill from that. So that's your first shot. Your second shot is for this vaccine called human papillomavirus. This virus called human papillomavirus that causes certain kinds of cancer. In guys, it causes cancer in the head and neck. In females, it causes cervical cancer. In both, it can cause other kinds of cancer, and it can cause warts in the private areas as well. Nobody wants that, and we certainly want to protect you against these kinds of cancers as best we can as you get older. So we want to immunize. So I recommend getting immunized with that today. And then your third one is for this brain infection and inflammation called meningitis. You have a particularly wonderful brain as you've exhibited today. I want to protect that brain, so you should be immunized against this. Do you or your parent have any questions about those shots today? And that's kind of the approach that I take. And then I allow that discussion to flow from there so that the parent can ask if they want to start asking about HPV in the context of it, being a sexually transmitted disease, and what does that mean, and why do we immunize now? We can get those questions answered. The adolescent can ask questions that they're comfortable with. I'm not pushing anyone to have conversations that they're not necessarily comfortable with in surrounding the vaccine. We always try to have conversations about things like sex and more difficult topics, but I don't think that the vaccine needs to be the jumping off point for that.
I mean, we talk all the time about the questions parents have about vaccines. We're very parent-focused a lot of the time. But I'm imagining that adolescents have questions as well, especially, when you've got kids coming back in at age 16 and they need their booster and their meningitis B vaccines. What kind of questions do you get from kids?
In my experience, the number one and two questions that I get are, how bad is it going to hurt, and where are you going to put it? I don't get teens really nervous about whether the vaccine is safe or not. I think that they generally are perfectly fine with the fact that this vaccine is a good idea and that it's a safe thing to do. What their risk reward balance is going on in their head is, I'm healthy. I don't think I need a shot. Maybe it prevents something way down the line that I don't know that I'm going to get, versus it's going to hurt right now. And so to reassure them about that, I think is important. If you've got a young, I do this with both 4-year-olds and every age between 4 and the teens. When I give that spiel that I gave, I also say something to the effect of, it's going to hurt. If we're talking about teen vaccines, it'll be like, it's going to make your arm sore for the day. That's true. You're going to do great. You're very strong and capable, and you're going to do a great job. And I use similar language for a 4-year-old too, maybe a little bit more simplified, to just give them that understanding, that self-motivation to know that they can handle this before they get the shot.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering too, one of the worries that people sometimes have about the HPV vaccine or about any vaccines in adolescents is, and I should stop calling them adolescents. Adolescents don't like being called adolescents, so I'll call them young people. One of the worries that people sometimes have is that they might faint. So what sort of precautions can kids take if they're worried that they might faint because of a shot?
They can just hang out in the office. I mean, if there's going to be anything that causes pain, really anywhere, but particularly a needle, can potentially cause a teenager to swoon. And that is just a vasovagal response that they can have to something that sets them off either because of the pain or because of the fear or because of both. And so, yes, you can have somebody faint. I've seen it once in an adolescent. and they were still in the office, and they were just kind of laying there, and then they kind of went whoo, and then they were fine. So I usually just counseled everybody in their teens about that particular possibility and ask if they want to wait and hang out in my office for a while, or if they're feeling okay, make sure that they're just well supervised and that they're gonna not be anywhere where they could hurt themselves if they started to feel faint, and that seems to be sufficient.
I think the important thing for kids to know too is that shots hurt. The pain is pretty short lasting. Sometimes that Tdap can make your arm sore, but that you're going to go on with your life and it's going to be just fine.
And the HPV is generally considered to be the more painful of the shots, which
I know.
Yeah, if I recall from Dr. Offit saying it's because of a higher concentration of sodium in the shot compared to others. It's basically salt in the wound. So it can be a little more painful, a little longer lasting in terms of soreness. And so I think that's why it has a little bit more of a higher fainting rate than other vaccines. But still, I've given, how many hundreds of vaccines, and I've seen one kid get a little woozy afterwards. So it's not super common.
Right, and that's not really anything to worry about. And I'll say, as far as getting woozy, I was watching my son get dental work done one time, and that made me woozy. So there's all sorts of things that can make you woozy. You don't have to be a kid to get woozy. You can be a grown-up and still get woozy just because you're watching someone else in pain. So that's a thing that happens. It's okay, and it sounds like it doesn't happen a lot. So that's a huge relief. And I think one of the important things that Ethan's going to tell us is how great it is as a young person to know that you're really making a difference in the world, that you're making the world healthier because you're getting your shots. And that is something that I think every kid can take pride in. That kids don't get a lot of choice about their health care, but they still have to sit there and they still have to get the shots, and it's a big deal, and it's a good thing, and it's a good thing not just for your body but for the other people around you. And so Ethan talked a little bit about herd immunity, and I'm wondering if you can just give us, the elevator speech. What exactly is herd immunity?
Sure. So the idea of herd immunity kind of derives from the idea of a herd of buffalo or herd of other animals. And although that is not always the most palatable way to think about people, it has some, it illustrates certain points about getting immunized, which is to say that in a herd of buffalo, and I am no expert, I'm no whatever it is the professional buffalo watcher is, I am not that. But my understanding is
even though you're from Iowa,
right? My understanding is that the herd, kind of allows the stronger, healthier buffalo to be out in the outside, kind of protecting the weaker or sicker or less capable, less healthy buffalo, and those buffalo are kind of interspersed amongst these healthier buffalo. And the idea being that the entire herd is stronger if it's done that way, as opposed to just keeping the weaker ones in one part or whatnot, where they might get attacked. They're being protected by the healthier ones who can take it, who can take the everyday kind of threats. That's the case here when we talk about herd immunity, when we talk about vaccines and disease. A lot of people also call it community immunity, but that doesn't quite illustrate that same idea, in my opinion. But the idea being that there are quite a number of people in our communities who are immunocompromised or medically fragile. And these are often the people who not only do vaccines not necessarily work well in, or maybe not work at all if they're immunocompromised, but then also more likely to have the complications of the disease. So if you don't have much of an immune system because of a medicine that you take, or because you've had chemotherapy, or because of a disease that you have, not only does that vaccine not work, but if you catch the wild virus, you are more likely to die. And so if everybody who can be immunized is immunized, and we are well spread out, all those people who are vulnerable are spread out amongst us, that basically makes it so that there's a level, if the right number of people are immunized, that it just makes it exponentially more difficult for a virus that comes across the sea to us to find enough people to infect to stay in circulation. It burns itself out very quickly if we have achieved levels of immunization that kind of beat that herd immunity threshold. Whereas if we're below it, then there's a much higher chance that that virus can find person to person and stay around in the community and maybe just continue to circulate and find those vulnerable individuals, and then they're in big trouble. So by everybody being immunized, not only do we as healthy people benefit, but we also do our less healthy neighbors a favor.
And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, I think we should listen to our Ethan interview now. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. Let's put it on. Roll tape.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk to Ethan Posard. And we are privileged to be joined by Ethan Posard today, who is a really inspirational person. First of all, he is something that very few people are. He is a published author of a children's book. He also is the only person no, that's not true. We've interviewed one other person, but he's one of two people we've ever interviewed on this podcast who has an IMDb entry. Did you know that, Ethan?
Yeah, I'm glad to make the cut.
Yeah, so he's sort of a superstar. The other really cool thing about Ethan is that he is only 17 years old, which is amazing in and of itself, and we are so happy to have you. So welcome, Ethan.
Yeah, thank you for that warm intro. I'm glad to be here.
So I just want to start at the beginning with you.
All right.
So we came to know you because you are the only person I have ever seen getting a vaccine on camera in film. So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
So my oldest sister, Camille, was a writer for this documentary called Invisible Threat. This documentary basically goes over the science of vaccines and any outbreaks that happened during the time of the filming. So she took that as an opportunity while I needed to get a shot to record it. So I remember actually going onto the drive there and asking my mom why I needed the shot. And I got the answer most kids get, which is you just need it so you don't get sick. Mm-hmm. Which, looking back on it, I guess that is true, but there's just so much more to getting a vaccine, and I really wanted to display that image with the book.
Now, you had an experience, kind of the backstory of that involved a dog of yours, correct?
Yeah, Roxy.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so I got Roxy when she was about 3 weeks old, and she wasn't in great shape. We knew something was wrong, so we took her to the vet the next day. We weren't sure with the test. They didn't come back in time, but they thought she might have this disease called parvo, which is a vaccine preventable disease. But since there's some dogs in our community that didn't have that vaccine, we had to actually keep Roxy indoors, where she couldn't go on walks outside, couldn't go to the beach. And so it's from there that I learned about concepts like herd immunity and the importance of getting a vaccine for more than just yourself. And I think I try to say that image in the book.
Yes, you do a really nice job of that in the book, too. Before I ask you about the book, though, I just want to ask you, do you think that because animals are so vulnerable, that it's easier for a kid to connect the dots on all of those really hard concepts when they're dealing with their pet?
Oh, definitely. I think the pet in the household is just a great example to be put in. It's just such an innocent creature that we all love, and if anything bad happens to it, I think we pay a little more attention.
So your involvement in this documentary, which I'm sure we'll talk about at the end and how people can access that, your involvement was pretty much then at that point, as a person who was brought along to like be the to demonstrate immunization on, did you have more
the pin cushion?
Yes, exactly right. Did you have, was that how your involvement was, or did you have more in the process of creating that film?
Yeah, so with just that film, I was basically just the guinea pig for getting the shot. I was actually told like a day before, and I'm not a really big fan of shots, so getting it recorded was a little challenge to get through, but I'm glad I didn't say ow.
And then that clearly did not stop your interest in this topic. So how did things unfold after that?
I definitely got more into it with my talking to my sister and my mom and just learning about the whole community. And from there, I kind of saw an opportunity to send a message that I had.
And that sort of led you to wanting to reach kids, and so you decided to write a children's book. But let me back up, because I say you decided, like it was just like, hey, I'm going to write a children's book. But I'm assuming it's more complex than that. How did you make that choice?
So actually in 6th grade, we had this assignment where we had to pick this significant figure and make a story about him, and then that story was then turned into a children's book. So I think I just had that fresh in my mind of a children's book is such a great way to convey a message, especially if your target audience is kids. And even though in that 6th grade assignment I chose Garfield of all people, I think that assignment as a whole has just been so influential in this process.
And the name of your book is The Shots Book, right?
Yeah,
that's not the full title.
Book.
The Shots Book.
Little Brother's Superhero Tale.
Because you make the point in the book that by getting a vaccine, kids become superheroes. So can you say a little bit more about that? About how why you wanted to frame it as a tale of a superhero, and how you think that reaches kids?
Yeah, definitely. So I think most kids not only love superheroes, but don't understand that the powers a vaccine gives them. Because not only does it make them not get them sick, it also protects the people in their community. Either if they have immunal disease where they can't get the vaccine, if it's that small percentage where the vaccine isn't efficient, or any of those exceptions. I think showing them that you can get a superpower where you protect your community by getting this shot is just such a message that's going to stick with them.
So once you had published the book, what happened after that? Were you encouraged by the support you had? Or I know your sister and her classmates had a lot of pushback on their film.
Yeah.
Did you get any pushback, or was it mostly supportive?
Surprisingly, no. I had a lot of helpful people, including you two, help me through this process of getting the book out through peer editing and just getting the connections I needed. I know Rady's Children's Hospital was very helpful in ordering books during the early stages of the publishing, especially with the University of Minnesota.
Did you get then much in terms of feedback for the reception of the book? How was that?
Yeah, one of the biggest feedbacks was having it in more than one language, so we actually changed it from English and Spanish.
And then what kind of distribution then did you find in terms of how did you get the book out to everybody, get people to order it? What was your strategy there?
So my strategy was just like using the internet for our advantage. We used Amazon as our primary distributor. We also have the theshotsbook.com where you can order a book for 30% discount.
And have you ever had the pleasure of reading your book in front of an audience of children?
I have actually a few times. It was a very interesting skill to learn. I'm kind of shy, so reading in front of a bunch of eyes just was like not something that happened immediately. Mm-hmm. But I remember going to the Seminole Reservation, where I actually was there for 5 days and 4 nights, and I was able to speak to a tremendous amount of kids in different days, reading the book, and their faces after reading it. They had some very cute reactions to it.
Oh. I love reading to kids. I think it's a lot of fun because they connect with books so well. And I'm imagining that they connected really well with your story. It's about a kid. It's about superheroes. It's got a dog in it. I mean, really, what more could you want? So what kind of feedback did you get from the kids?
The kids loved it from what I could see. There's actually this page in the book where it says, one way to keep yourself healthy is to drink a lot of water, eat your vegetables, and stay away from sugary drinks. And after I did one reading, I had a bunch of kids come up to me with plates of celery and carrots, which I just thought was so cute.
That's great. So, since you've published the book, that was a few years ago. How old were you when the book was published?
I believe I was around 13 years old when it was published.
13. So you've got 4 years under your belt. How have you been involved in this vaccine advocacy world since then?
So yeah, the book definitely allowed me to keep my foot inside the door, which opened a tremendous amount of opportunity. With the American Academy of Pediatrics Florida chapter, I have been the youth advisor. And so I just help with PSAs. If they have any logos for stickers they want to send out, I help with that. Just for the community service part, we also have a Twitter where we try to keep with the community and try and help usually with I know back to school we have new stickers out that it's fight flu and immunize and school ready.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to get some of your stickers, and you've been so helpful in terms of helping kind of reaching out to me and being like, okay, what can I do? What can we, put together for your clinic and whatnot? So I wanted to thank you for that. I have had kids love your book as well. I love your book. I think it's brilliantly conceived and written. So good job. And
Thank you so much.
One of the things that I want to talk about and dig into a little bit is how much we're seeing right now of youth advocacy in the country and how powerful it can be. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that as somebody who kind of started to do very much youthful advocacy at age 13 or younger. How has that path been for you? How does it feel to be a youth advocate for something like this? And how important do you find that voices like yours are in this conversation about immunizations?
Yeah, I think young advocates are something that's going to be coming upwards in the future. I hope to send the message that not only should you be getting your shots, but if you look at my story as a 13-year-old who got the book published and has just been immersed in community service after that, you don't have to wait till you're an adult to get involved or make a change. You can do it at the age of, 6, 5, whenever you have a message you want to send out. You don't need to wait till you're 18 to send that message.
If you had a magic wand and you could change the way vaccine advocacy works, change the messages we give or change who's talking or change anything, what things would you change? You don't have to pick the top ones. Just what are some of the things you would change about how people talk about vaccines to kids and to their parents who are choosing whether or not to vaccinate them?
Yeah, so I think there should be, if I had a magic wand, I would definitely try and spend most of the focus on younger individuals, because those are going to be the people in the future that become parents and have kids.
Yes.
And I think especially with campaigns that we've seen in the past, like anti-smoking or anti-drunk driving, it started with getting the message to the kids, and those kids stopped their parents from smoking or any bad activity. So it's through kids that change is possible. Also with combating false information online. I think it's a very scary thing that a expecting parent can look up online, should I get my kid immunized? And they get a wave of misinformation that can make them have the wrong decision.
I'm wondering if you think that kids are more or less savvy to that sort of misinformation that's on the internet. Are they better able to look at something and say, oh, this is not a thing that's reliable? Or, is that something we have to be concerned about?
Yeah, I think just speaking from my generation, I know we've grown up with the laptops and the phones in our hands, and I think we've seen from apps like Instagram and Twitter that not everything on the internet is true. And living and having that as part of our lives, I think a kid is more easily able to sense false information than an adult.
Well, I sure hope so.
maybe this problem that we're dealing with vaccine hesitancy is going to solve itself, so if we just wait long enough. But I think that what you're saying is, that also fits with a lot of the research that shows that kind of vaccine decisions are made, even when they're made by adults, they're made at younger and younger ages. They're made, some parents or expecting parents have already decided before maybe they've even become pregnant and whatnot. So I think that's very, very insightful to be reaching out to youth. And I'm hopeful that you and others like you are going to be a part of that so that we can continue to keep these good messages going forward. And thank you again for all that you've done in that regard so far. So do you have any plans going forward now? You've got, in terms of related to vaccines, you've got a book, you've got kind of some outreach that you do. You going to kind of just continue this, or do you have other ideas that you want to mention?
Yeah, I don't have any ideas of now. I still see myself in the future as being an advocate. I just need to find that next issue, I guess. But through this book, I've actually had a tremendous amount of direction into what I want to be an advocate about.
That is wonderful. The other thing I'm wondering about is that I know there are a number of kids your age who, like you, are becoming concerned about disease outbreaks. They see that these diseases that their parents never saw are kind of trying to make entry back into the United States, into Canada, and places like that. But not every kid is up for writing a children's book, and it's probably not, terribly reasonable to expect every kid to write a children's book. So what are some really easy things you think your average 13 to, 17 and beyond year old, what can they do?
Yeah, if they're concerned, they can do the smallest of things. They can talk to their friends, they can ask an adult. It doesn't have to be a big action like writing a book to start learning. The internet, although has misinformation, can be a great tool to learn as well.
Do you have any favorite places to go to find out more information about vaccines?
Well, just like podcasts like Voices for Vaccines is also a great way to start. So if you're listening to this, good job.
So I'm wondering how vaccines are handled in schools these days, what your experiences have been with learning about vaccines or vaccine preventable diseases in schools, if you have at all, and what you think might need to change about that.
Yeah, so I know in California, they made it, there's a proposition where you have to be vaccinated in order to go to public school. And as going to public school, I think I've seen that. I went to an elementary school where it was only 80% vaccinated. So just from there, I can see that although the public school is in the right direction, I don't see them having enough impact, especially with terms like herd immunity, which are so vital in learning. Mm-hmm. I've never seen herd immunity in a science textbook, at least in my district.
So you feel like, in general, disease and disease prevention could be more included in the curriculum in schools?
Definitely.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. I think one start, if I may be so bold, would be to encourage grade school libraries to have your book. And I think that more books about vaccines, the better. I know that grade school libraries are always thrilled to get donations of books, just for all of our listeners out there who are, wondering how to support you and the kids around you. That's a great thing to do. And that might be a campaign we want to look at in the future, is, encouraging people to donate your book and other vaccine books for kids to their local grade school libraries.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great place where they could be.
Before we go, Ethan, I just want to ask you, what do you want other kids to know about vaccines and vaccine advocacy?
Just from vaccines, that getting a shot doesn't just affect you, although it's a big part of it. It also affects the people in your community, and getting a shot protects those who can't. So becoming a part of the herd is so important.
Yeah. And you have a hashtag about that too, don't you?
Yeah, so it's hashtag I am the herd. It's basically a story of people getting their shots, showing that they are a part of the herd, that they are in the right direction.
Absolutely. So where can people find your book and your sister's movie and you on social media if they need to?
All right, so to find the book, you can either go on Amazon by looking up the Shots book, A Little Brother Superhero Tale. To find another way, you could go to theshotsbook.com. We sell books there for 30% discount, along with stickers that say immunized and school ready and fight flu for free. And for Twitter, my Twitter handle is at I am the herd.
Yes. So if you have anything great to say about young people and advocacy, make sure to tag Ethan on Twitter. I know that he really would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us, Ethan. It was such a pleasure to talk to you tonight or today.
Yeah, this was such a nice experience. This is my first podcast.
Oh, well, I hope it's not your last. Everyone needs to scoop you up. Thank you also for joining us, those of you who are listening. We always love having you too. My name is Karen Ernst, and I am the Executive Director of Voices for Vaccines.
And I am Nathan Boonstra. You can find me online. My handle is at PedsGeekMD on Twitter, or find me at my blog, PedsGeekMD.com.
All right. Stay healthy, everyone.
Bye-bye.